So, hi, and welcome to this month's Property Clinic, where we're going to be talking all about the Vacant Property Grant. And joining me here today is Christopher O'Sullivan, TD. So, welcome, Christopher.
Thank you, Magella. Great to be here. Great idea.
Great. And Chris, we all know that, supply of housing is so low at the moment. In fact, I know in Cork it's down, DAF recorded it down 20% in the past year, especially in the second-hand market. And yet, Chris, we've so many vacant and derelict buildings. I mean, all we have to do is look at our own towns and villages. They're there. If we could only bring those back into the market. I mean, when you think about it, services are nearly already in place for the majority of them. So it may seem like an easier option. But I suppose the problem comes down to the cost of doing that, which is where the Vacant Property Grant was introduced. So, Chris, would you like to tell us, kind of explain what the Vacant Property Grant is?
Yeah, so first of all, you're absolutely right, Magella. We talk about housing targets and building new houses. And in fairness, that element has ramped up massively nationally, at least in terms of commencement of houses, completion of new houses. I think we're on course for up and towards 50,000 new houses by the end of this year, which is above the targets that we set ourselves. But having said that, many people would say the targets that we set ourselves aren't high enough. But one thing is for sure, supply is still an issue, and you'd know that more than anyone else in terms of trying to get access to houses. And then it really frustrates people then when they're walking along through their village or through their town, and every second house might be vacant, or there's a over-the-shop premises that might have been vacant for years, and it's really frustrating to see that no one is living there and no one is occupying it. And there are so many reasons why it's a good idea to bring these properties back into the market or back into a habitable situation. Number one, obviously, we need to get people off those housing lists. So we need to accommodate those people who are having difficulty getting access to housing. And we know there are thousands out there in that situation. So that's number one. But there's also the fact that if you take any town in West Cork, your own Bandon there or Clonakilty or smaller villages like, let's say, Drimoleague or Timoleague or wherever it may be, you can imagine the added benefit to the business if you had extra footfall because those places are occupied. There probably would have been a time when on Main Street in Bandon where every premises was kind of occupied by the business owner maybe or someone was living there, and you can imagine the hustle and bustle of your town back then. Over time, unfortunately, all those units have become vacant. Well, most of them at least. So imagine trying to get those people back into the town centre, the extra footfall, your businesses would flourish again, your butchers, your cafes, whatever it might be. So there's so many benefits, and that's why the government finally, and I know it's a lot of people's bugbear, and it's taken a while, but we do finally have a scheme that's not perfect, and it may need to be tweaked going forward, but it certainly is a scheme that is aimed at bringing those properties into the market, and that's the Crí scheme, or is how it's labelled. But it's the Vacant Property Scheme for it's a lot easier, I think, to get across exactly what it says on the tin. And that is a scheme.
How much is available under that grant, Chris?
Exactly. So that depends on what you're dealing with. So if it's a property that's habitable but has been vacant for a 2-year period, then your grant is 50,000 euro towards works in terms of bringing it into a habitable or improving it. If it's deemed derelict and not habitable, then after you have, I suppose, got the proper professionals and engineers in to confirm that it is derelict, you need a report from an engineer to confirm that, then you can get a top up of 20,000. So that brings it up to 70,000. Now, if you're lucky and you live on an island, and I'm not sure if any of your viewers are going to be island dwellers, then you can actually increase that even further. It's 60k for a vacant property and 84,000 for a derelict. But for the most part, what you're dealing with is either 50 for a house that's been, or a property that's been vacant for 2 years, or 70 for a derelict building.
And just to differentiate between vacant and derelict again there, Chris, there is a register of derelict buildings. Am I correct in saying that? And if you wanted to get a property inspected, you need a professional then to certify it as derelict.
Exactly. I mean, it's a lot easier if it's one of those that are registered. I know for years, like Cork County Council obviously is the local authority that you and I would be dealing with for the most part. We didn't have a dereliction officer, and now that's all in place. And a lot of it is down to this fact that this Vacant Property Grant has been set up. and they're now well resourced, and the information, just by picking up the phone to them, actually, Magella, the information that they can give you is incredibly helpful. It's something that we use a lot in our office. But the data and details, and they'll hold your hand and guide you through the process step by step. So any questions like that, they have
So
that.
that's
But
a
yeah,
very good resource for people to
it is, and
contact
I'll
their
give the
local county
details of that
council.
at the end, actually.
Great, we can share that on the link there. And what criteria do you need to qualify for a grant in the first place, Chris?
Yeah, so we kind of mentioned you need to own the property, or you need to prove that you're in the process of buying the property. So that's number one. You need to prove that the house has been vacant for 2 years. People often ask the question, how do you prove that? The most common way people prove it is utility bills. So if you can show that your ESB bill, or the ESB readings for those 2 years have been zero or very close to zero, low, then that's a good way of proving vacancy. So that's an important item. Proof of ownership is either, as I said, the title, or proof of payment of local property tax. That's another way of proving that you own the building. You then have to verify that you're going to live in the
And
building.
just before you go on there, Chris,
Yeah.
I know that if there was somebody interested in buying a property that may qualify for the vacant property grant, they'd often seek a letter from us, the estate agents, supposed to prove that the property was vacant.
And that's really important, because I guess the cohort of people that were most looking to help with this grant is those who are looking to purchase, and who have heretofore, they might look at a vacant property or a derelict property and said, look, I'm not going to go near that. It's going to cost too much, number one. The other thing about that is as you well know, there's some very good housing support schemes out there, but so many of them apply to new builds only. So your first time buyer scheme, your help to buy scheme, the 30K that's based on your contributions to your payments and your stamps over the years. Most of those apply only to new builds. So this is the first one that is applied to those who at the moment are renting possibly, or they don't own a home and they're looking to buy a home. That's a really important element of it. If this was for people who already owned homes, it wouldn't work.
Yes.
I suppose the other category then is, so I mean that's for me, that's the one I'm most passionate about, those who are looking to buy their first home and can use this grant in order to renovate it. And so many people have already benefited from that, and it's lovely to see them turn a shabby property into a really nice property and then live in it after. But
Yeah,
then
in fact, Chris, we've sold a few of them, and I only recently went back to a family who had used the vacant property grant to do up the property, and it's just lovely to see the property back in use and a roof over another family's house.
100%. Yeah, and it's a no-brainer. And I personally think it's so good that we could tweak it even further, offer even larger grants. That's what I'd like to see happening. I can't say whether that's going to happen or not, but I think
see that is where the problem is.
Yeah.
You think 50,000, 70,000, but it doesn't dig a hole when you go into a project.
Especially the 70 for a derelict building, because if there's structural issues there, I mean, you could, as you say, you may only be scratching the surface.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the other key, I suppose, category is, so we've covered those who are moving into a house or who might be living there permanently or who might be buying to live in it permanently. Then there's the other category, in that if you have another property that you want to do up, that you own the property, you can then again apply for the grant. But it has to be for long-term rental. Obviously, look, there's lots of short-term lets out there. There's lots of holiday lets, etc., that provide an important role in terms of hospitality and tourism. But I'd imagine you could verify this, Jella, that in terms of rental property, they're just not there. And because they're not there, landlords are able to demand quite a lot in terms of rent. So we need to get rental property also into the market. So the other category of property that qualifies for this is a property that you wish to do up but it has to go on the long-term market. And you can actually apply for 2 grants. If you could apply for a grant for a property to live in yourself, and then a second grant if you're renting out the property long-term lease. And I think that's an important part of this as well.
Yeah, and that was actually one of the questions that came in to us, was, they applied for the grant for their principal private residence.
Yeah.
They had another one on the grounds that they were going to rent out, were they eligible for the two? And the answer is yes, Chris.
Two max, two maximum properties, but they have to be that different offering. One, principal residence, and two, to rent out for long term.
And how long is long term? How long do they have to keep the property before without having to pay back the grant?
Yeah, I think there's different categories, and there's really helpful tables on the gov.ie website. But as time goes on, so let's say if you sell on the property straight away, I think let's say after a year, you have to pay back, you have to refund that in full. I think after 5 years, it's 75%.
75%,
And after 10 years, then if you decide to sell that property after 10 years, then you don't have to refund any of the grant. But the hope is that most people are availing of these, are availing of them to kind of be in their home for life, if you get me.
Yes. And so, like, say for example, you have a buyer out there now, and they see a property and it's vacant with a few years, it needs doing up. What's the first step that they need to do to inquire about this vacant property grant?
So this comes back to, I talked about the vacant homes officer and that office that they've set up in Cork County Council. A really fantastic resource. In fact, I rang them for bits of information just before coming on here, but my office deals with them on a day-to-day basis. Very helpful staff, very quick to answer the phone, and also very quick to respond to emails. Personally, because it's such a daunting, I think, project to take on, I think phone call is the best. So I just have the details here, and we can put these on any social media posts as well. So the Vacant Homes Officer in Cork County Council, they'll be contacted on 021 428 5328, or alternatively 021 428 5313. And then they can be emailed as well, which is important, and that's cree.cunaha@corkco.ie. So cree.cunaha, that's an Irish phrase, obviously. Cree, CROI, .cunaha, CONAITHE, @corkco.ie. And I said we'll paste them, but this is for me the most important first step is reaching. You can do all the online reading, you can go onto the government website and look at the FAQs, but to have someone there talk you through it step by step is incredibly helpful. But not just that, it's comforting to the applicant because they feel like they're not on their own, and there's someone there to talk them through.
And there's so many different variations depending on your circumstances. There's nothing like catching the phone and speaking to someone. I fully support that, Chris.
Exactly.
And so once they make that initial contact, that person then will guide them through the next steps.
They guide them through, and that's invariably filling out of an application form. So that application form is filled out to the best of the ability with all the correct details where possible, all the correct extra documentation. So whether that's your utility bill showing that it's vacant, whether it's your proof of your payment of the LPT, whatever that information is, that's then sent back. It's sent back, and then it's assessed by an inspector. So they've a few inspectors in different areas. Some areas are more busy than others. So in certain parts of the county, the inspection will happen faster. In others, it tends to happen a bit slower. But the inspector is then sent out, investigate the property, and then a couple of weeks after that, the application is either approved or perhaps further information is sought, or in the very odd occasion, it may be denied. But that's how it works. And once you have your approval, then you're good to go.
Okay. And one question that came in there from somebody was, can they move into the house while they make the application, or does it need to be approved before they move into the house?
From my understanding, it has to be approved, and that's a really good question. In fact, I'm glad I got clarification. I actually wasn't sure whether you actually had to stay out of the property while the works are ongoing. So the answer is that you ideally the application has to be approved before you can actually move into the house. But once it's approved, you can move in, and works can commence if it's something that you can work around in terms of living in there. But my advice, and the best advice that I've got so far, is hold off until approval is made. But there may be a bit of flexibility around that. And again, that's where picking up the phone to that office in County Cork really helps in that. Because I can see how it would suit some people. You've identified a property, it's been vacant for 2 years, but you need to get out of your existing premises or where you're renting. And I would absolutely talk to the Vacant Homes Officer in Cork County Council and say, look, we're under a bit of pressure here. And they do have a bit of discretion. That's important. They have a bit of discretion. So don't take my answer as absolute definite.
But it's interesting to raise those queries before you go about
100%,
doing
yeah.
these things. Absolutely. And I suppose one of the big issues is getting access to finance, Chris. You know, the grant isn't paid until the works are done. So I know like many banks aren't very lenient to lend towards doing up other properties. What advice would you give people in that side of it?
Yeah, so what most people seem to be doing in that coming to my office is either they're taking out they're getting credit union loans, seem to be one of the most popular options in terms of essentially kind of seen as home improvements. One of the good things is your local authority home loan, which is a form of finance, which it's for people on certain incomes. For example, they may have been they may have been turned down for finance from one of your regular mortgage lenders, one of the mainstream banks. Therefore, they can then contact the local authority. It's a different section, but there is a local authority home loan run by Cork County Council, whereby you can get access to 70, 80, up to 150 thousand euro towards these type of works. And the good news is it can be used in combination. So that's pretty good, because the rules that apply to a lot of these schemes, as I said before, are for new homes, but local authority home loan is one where it isn't. So they can be used in combination, and we have had people use those loans before, but the most
And that's a
straightforward.
relatively new one, the local authority purchase and renovation loan, Chris, isn't it?
That's separate again. That's separate again to the local authority home loan. And also you have and one of the most common questions there, and you may be asking it later, is can it be used in combination with the SCI home improvement grants? And the answer again to that is yes, it can. It can be done in combination. And as we know, if you're looking to avail of a deep retrofit, or if you're looking to do a wrap and insulation and new windows and new heating systems, we know that they're not cheap, but there are grants available. But one of the new measures that has been introduced in the last couple of months is the introduction of the home energy very low interest rate loans that are available from a lot of lenders, and that can be used in combination as well. So, but as I said, what we find is and not to name any financial institution over the others, but a lot of people they may be in a position where they have access to a bit of cash or a bit of capital that they can use. But a lot of them are going to the credit unions for that kind of bridging loan and then paying it back. But one thing that's important, and it is a question that we get asked: do you get a straight up cash payment when the loan is approved? That's not the case. It has to be vouched expenses that are sent in, and then you draw down the loan.
And then it's important, I know they have on the website there, they have some details of how you can use the grant, like for things like cells and things and windows. You know, they've itemized out what limit is available.
They have
That's interesting.
Very helpful table again on gov.ie, and I'd encourage anyone to look at it. But that and pretty much everything that you can think of that would be involved in renovating a home or doing up a home is included, whether that's your windows, your flooring, your roof, your external wall work, internal wall work that has to be done. Certain groundworks, I think, outside may not be covered, but pretty much everything you can think of is covered. And then it actually gives the amount as well that's recoupable through the grant scheme as well. Very helpful table. And again, maybe that's something that we can share
a lot
here.
of guidance there. There's no doubt about it. And just, I suppose, one thing that came from one of our listeners there, a question was, that the timeline is 13 months to complete it. And I suppose what they find is it's very hard to get builders and contractors. And what would happen if they hadn't completed it within the 13 months?
Yeah. So the good news on that is that there is discretion. And again, the vacant, the offices, the vacant housing office in Cork County Council is key here. They can show discretion, but it's not going to be, discretion won't be shown if you just sat on this for 6-7 months and didn't do anything. You have to have a good reason as to why you need the extra time. So you just pointed out a very valid one there. Builders are like a hen's teeth at the moment, very hard to come by. And if proof can be shown that you made every effort to secure a builder within a time frame, then that'll be taken into account. So that's the biggest thing. The discretion, there is definitely an element of discretion that can be shown in terms of if you've gone to the 13 months and you're over that. But it's important to bear this in mind as well, Magella. you're not talking about getting another 13 months. You're talking an extension of months at the very most, maybe two. But again, that's very much down to the discretion of the officer that you're dealing with. But listen, as I said, I found them a pleasure to deal with. And I'm sure if a proper approach is made and a case is made, then there's discretion there. But I can understand the pressures in terms of
And I'm
timelines.
sure most people will want to get it done as fast as possible,
True.
as well. So
Yeah, you
I
want to get
don't
in there
think,
and get it
yeah.
done and get your money back.
And absolutely. And Chris, the last question now, and I know we discussed this briefly earlier, and you probably don't have an answer to it, but it's worth asking. What are the chances of getting those grants increased?
Ooh. Like, so the one thing I would say is, in fairness to a lot of these housing grants, and Darragh O'Brien was the minister, I know him well, where things haven't worked in the past, he's been willing to show flexibility. So I'll give you an example. There was a waiver for development charges that was introduced to try and take a bit of pressure off people who are building their
Which
first
worked
home.
very well.
That worked very well. It was due to come to an end in June. There was an appeal made because of the wet weather that we had at the start of the year. Could we extend it? And it was extended. This grant itself, the original amounts were 30,000 for a vacant and 50,000 for a derelict. That wasn't working. We weren't seeing the numbers of people availing it that we wanted to see. So they adapted, they increased it. So if there's a slowdown in this, then possibly. But I guess what I don't want to do is imagine if I came along here and said, yeah, we're going to double it. What you're going to totally, your market would collapse because everyone's going to wait until this happens when it may never happen. So I don't know. It's something that I would like to see because look, the numbers are pretty encouraging around Cork. I think there's been
What are the numbers, Chris?
about 700-800 applications in the county, and over 500 have been approved. Now, that may seem like a drop in the ocean, but I think it's quite encouraging considering it's a scheme that's only been, the new version of the scheme has only been around for a year.
And what we're seeing as agents is we're even seeing the first-time buyers, which were mainly going to the new builds, they're really starting to come into the second-hand market now and explore options.
Brilliant, yeah. No, and we need to see that because, as I said, there's a frustration out there that there isn't, and a lot of these schemes aren't available for the second-hand houses and the older houses. But yeah, it's quite encouraging. So 500 have been approved so far, and more will come. And hopefully that number will increase further. But if we do see a stagnation or a drop, then I think maybe it needs to be looked at again, and especially with cost of building doesn't seem to be getting any cheaper. Materials, labor, it's very expensive. So
and trying to source it, then it's the other issue, Chris.
yes, exactly.
Trying to source the labor.
That is the other issue. But we'll see that. But I would encourage anyone who's intending to do this, go ahead, do it, and don't wait for any increases.
Chris, thank you so much for all that valuable information. I'll put your contact details at the bottom of this recording, and I'm sure you'd be happy to guide somebody along in their journey.
Yeah, so that's absolutely, please get in touch with my office. We have a great team there who are very au fait with this. But as well as that, the team in Cork County Council who deal with this, I have found super, super helpful in terms of getting information, and they really will hold you by the hand and walk you through it. They mightn't do the renovations for you, but they'll set it up for you.
He's got a big ass task for that, though.
I know,
Chris,
very good.
thank you very much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.